The wind howled like a wounded beast, tearing through the icy landscape. Snowflakes swirled in a chaotic dance, blurring the line between earth and sky. In the midst of this frozen chaos, a German shepherd stood motionless, her fur caked with ice. Two tiny pups huddled close to her, their shivering bodies barely visible on the thickening snow. Her eyes, filled with desperation, locked onto the faint glow of a house in the distance. Inside, a man watched through the frost-covered window, his heart torn between fear and compassion. What he decided next would change all their lives forever. The scene was nothing short of a winter nightmare. Temperatures had plummeted to dangerous lows, and the snowstorm showed no signs of relenting. The world outside was a frozen wasteland, where survival seemed almost impossible. Yet, in the heart of this icy chaos, a story of love and resilience was unfolding. A German shepherd, her coat heavy with snow, stood steadfast in the storm. Beside her, two tiny pups trembled, their small bodies struggling against the biting cold. The mother dog's instincts were clear: protect her young at all costs. But even her strength had limits. Not far away, a man sat in his warm home, unaware of the drama unfolding just beyond his doorstep. As the storm intensified, he glanced out the window, his gaze drawn to the faint movement in the snow. What he saw would test his courage and compassion in ways he never imagined. This is a story of survival, of a mother's unwavering love, and of a man's life-changing decision. It's a tale that reminds us of the power of kindness, even in the harshest of conditions. Inside the warm, dimly lit house, the man paced nervously. The storm outside was unlike anything he'd seen in years. The wind rattled the windows, and the snow piled up against the door, threatening to seal it shut. He glanced at the clock. It was late, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. As he moved to close the curtains, something caught his eye, a faint movement in the snow, barely visible through the frost-covered glass. He wiped the window with his sleeve, squinting to get a better look. What he saw made his heart skip a beat. A German shepherd, her fur matted with ice, stood motionless in the storm. Beside her, two small pups huddled close, their tiny bodies shivering uncontrollably. The man's breath fogged the glass as he stared, his mind racing. He knew he should help, but fear held him back. What if the dogs were aggressive? What if they carried diseases? And the storm, it was too dangerous to venture outside. He'd heard stories of people getting lost in blizzards mere feet from their homes. He turned away, trying to push the image from his mind. But it was no use. The mother dog's eyes, filled with desperation, haunted him. He could almost feel her silent plea for help. Minutes passed, and the storm grew worse. The wind howled louder, and the snow began to drift against the house. The man couldn't shake the thought of those dogs out there, freezing to death. He thought about his own life, about the times he felt alone and helpless. Finally, he made a decision. He grabbed his coat and a thick blanket, his hands trembling as he zipped up. He didn't know what he'd do when he got outside, but he couldn't just stand there and do nothing. As he opened the door, the cold hit him like a wall. The wind tore at his coat, and the snow stung his face. He squinted into the storm, searching for the dogs. There they were, just a few feet away. The German shepherd looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. The pups whimpered, their tiny bodies barely moving. The man hesitated, his heart pounding. What if this was a mistake? But then he took a step forward, the snow crunching under his boots. The storm raged on, the wind howling like a wild animal. The man stood at the threshold, his breath visible in the freezing air. The German shepherd and her pups were just a few feet away, but the distance felt insurmountable. He tightened his grip on the blanket, his mind racing with uncertainty. The mother dog's eyes locked onto his, and in that moment he saw something that shattered his hesitation. a glimmer of hope. She wasn't just a stray animal. She was a mother fighting to protect her young. Her loyalty and resilience were undeniable. Taking a deep breath, the man stepped forward, the snow crunching under his boots. The cold bit his skin, but he pushed through, his focus entirely on the dogs. As he approached, the mother dog tensed, her body instinctively shielding the pups. "It's okay," the man said softly, his voice barely audible over the wind. He knelt down, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He extended the blanket toward them, his heart pounding in his chest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as if sensing his intentions, the German shepherd relaxed slightly. She nudged the pups toward him, her actions speaking louder than words. She was entrusting her babies to him. Carefully, the man wrapped the blanket around the shivering pups, lifting them gently into his arms. They were so small, so fragile. He could feel their rapid heartbeats against his chest. The mother dog watched intently, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and exhaustion. The man knew he couldn't leave her behind. "Come on," he urged, gesturing toward the house. To his relief, she followed, her steps slow but steady. The man led the way, the snow and wind battering them as they made their way back to the house. Every step felt like an eternity, but finally, they reached the door. Inside, the warmth enveloped them like a hug. The man set the pups down on the rug, unwrapping the blanket to let them breathe. The mother dog immediately went to them, licking their faces. The man watched, his heart swelling with emotion. He had no idea what would happen next, but in that moment, he knew he'd made the right decision. The warmth of the house was a stark contrast to the icy hell outside. The man stood in the doorway, catching his breath as he watched the German shepherd and her pups settle on the rug. The mother dog's exhaustion was evident. Her body sagged with relief as she curled around her babies, her eyes half closed. The man quickly sprang into action. He grabbed towels from the bathroom, gently drying the pups' tiny bodies. They whimpered softly, their shivering gradually subsiding as the warmth seeped into their fur. The mother dog watched intently, her tail giving a faint wag as if to say thank you. Next, he rummaged through his kitchen, finding a can of tuna and some leftover chicken. He placed the food in a bowl and set it down near the mother dog. She hesitated for a moment, then began to eat ravenously, her hunger overriding her wariness. As the dog settled, the man sat back, his mind racing. He hadn't planned for this. He wasn't a dog person, and he certainly hadn't expected to share his home with 3 unexpected guests. But as he watched the mother dog nuzzle her pups, something inside him shifted. Over the next few days, the storm continued to rage, trapping them all inside. The man found himself growing attached to the little family. He named the mother dog Bella and the pups Max and Luna. Bella's trust in him deepened, and she began to follow him around the house, her tail wagging whenever he entered the room. The pups, once weak and shivering, grew stronger by the day. Their playful antics brought a smile to the man's face, a welcome distraction from the isolation of the storm. He built a makeshift bed for them in the corner of the living room, and Bella seemed to approve, often curling up there with her babies. When the storm finally passed, the man faced a difficult decision. He knew he couldn't keep the dogs long term. His lifestyle wasn't suited for pets. But the thought of parting with them was unbearable. After much deliberation, he contacted a local animal rescue organization. They assured him that Bella and her pups would be placed in loving homes. On the day they left, the man felt a mix of sadness and relief. He knew he'd done the right thing, but saying goodbye was harder than he'd imagined. Months later, the man received updates from the rescue organization. Bella had been adopted by a family with a large backyard, where she could run and play to her heart's content. Max and Luna had found homes with families who adored them. The experience changed a man in ways he never expected. He began volunteering at the rescue organization, helping other animals in need. The storm had brought chaos, but it had also brought purpose and an unexpected family, even if only for a short time. The storm had passed, but its effects lingered, not just in the snowdrifts outside, but in the man's heart. What had started as an ordinary winter evening had turned into a life-changing experience, one that taught him the power of compassion and the unexpected ways it can transform a person. As he stood in his now quiet house, the absence of Bella, Max, and Luna was palpable. The once empty corner of the living room, now devoid of their makeshift bed, felt strangely hollow. Yet, the memories of their time together remained vivid. He could still hear the pup's playful barks and see Bella's trusting gaze as she looked up at him. The man had always considered himself a solitary person, someone who preferred the predictability of his routines. But the dogs had disrupted that, forcing him to step outside his comfort zone. In doing so, they had shown him a side of himself he hadn't known existed, a side capable of selflessness and deep connection. His decision to help them had been impulsive, driven by a moment of empathy that overrode his fears. Looking back, he realized it was one of the best decisions he'd ever made. Not only had he saved their lives, but they had also given him a sense of purpose and fulfillment he hadn't felt in years. The experience had also changed his perspective on life. He began to see the world differently, noticing the small acts of kindness that often go unnoticed. He started volunteering at the animal rescue organization, finding joy in helping other animals in need. It was a way to honor Bella, Max, and Luna, and to keep their spirit alive. One day, while sorting through some old photos, he came across a picture he'd taken of the dogs during their time together. Bella was lying on the rug, her head resting on her paws, while Max and Luna played beside her. The image brought a smile to his face, a reminder of the bond they'd shared. He realized that sometimes the most meaningful moments in life come from the unexpected. The storm had brought chaos, but it also brought clarity. It had shown him that even in the coldest, darkest times, there's always a glimmer of hope, and that hope often comes in the form of a simple act of kindness. As he placed the photo back in its frame, the man felt a sense of peace. He knew he would never forget Bella, Max, and Luna, or the lessons they had taught him. They had reminded him of the importance of compassion, the strength of a mother's love, and the resilience of life itself. And so, as the snow melted and the world outside began to thaw, the man stepped forward into a new chapter of his life, one shaped by the storm, the dogs, and the unexpected journey they had taken together.